what will the Mythic Decks from Call of the Stones be? What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wonders Workshop, and today, you guessed it, I'm going to be talking about the Mythic Decks coming out in Call of the Stones. Since the announcement came out, I've been trying to think what these three decks might be, and I think it's going to be really interesting to just speculate a little bit about it, but also just really interesting to see what they do end up being. So there's going to be three decks. That was specifically mentioned in the survey, and I believe in the announcement, but I'm not absolutely certain off the top of my head. But three Mythic decks. And the first thing it makes me wonder is, are we getting three dual orbital decks? If so, I think that would be really cool. And I think, it's going to be really interesting to see if they do actually end up being two orbital decks. I think, seeing two orbital, pre-con decks from Wonders of the First would be a huge sign to people that, two-color decks are working really well, and that it's something that we can really lean into. I know a lot of people are leaning into it anyway. I know some people who are sticking to mono orbital, and I know some people who are playing a splash of everything. And I think it's just really interesting to kind of try and speculate about what these decks might be. I would hazard a guess that it's going to be one of two things. I think it's either going to be, focused around new keywords, or it's going to be focused around what's really meta right now. I don't know what any of the new keywords are going to be. I got no clue. I'm hoping that we'll see some on death cards. If you did not see my previous video, I have linked it in the description below, so please go ahead and take a look. There is a keyword that is in the rules but not on any cards. I would love to see that in this set. That's on death, and like I said, I'll link my video about on death into the description below. And so there's just a lot of really interesting keywords that could get added in Call of the Stones that we could see decks about. The other option is that I think we could see something similar to what is meta right now. For instance, there's three kind of really meta decks. Imagine Dragons, banishing Pastel Drakes with Old Man Rocket, that sort of combo. There's Awakening Lands, like we saw in Cosmic Dust with Waranoko and a whole bunch of lands. And then, of course, there's Gazing Mouse, Seer's Gaze, and Moonfire Crystal Mouse, where you're just digging through your deck to find combo pieces. And if we look at what, the basics of how those decks function are, it's lands, blink, and draw. So those are popular meta decks right now. Oop, my thumb's getting in the screen. So I think we could see three decks. One that's focused on lands, that's focused on, providing things that build up that really sort of meta lands, awakening lands deck, and has a lot of good cards that we know a lot of people are going to want because they're really popular in that meta deck right now. Similarly, Imagine Dragons, banishing and then returning. We see that with Portal. We see that a lot with banishment and return, in both Tallwind and Boundless. So I think we could see a lot there. Just some blink is what we call it in Magic, when you banish or exile or something, and then it comes back and it re-triggers its enter ability. So lots of cards could be really interesting to see there. Like I said, if that deck is popular and those abilities and combos are popular, I would expect that we could see that as a pre-constructed Mythic deck. And then, of course, there's, like I said, the Gazing Mouse combo, Seer's Gaze, and Moonfire Crystal Mouse, where you are just delving through your deck to find combo pieces. It'll be interesting to see if we see a draw-based deck. You have to be really careful with draw-based decks, because if you go to draw a card and you can't draw, then you lose. So it's not as simple as just digging through your deck. You have to have the energy to capitalize on having drawn the majority of your deck. And so there's just a lot of different things to be aware of. And, you know, obviously we're probably not going to see reprints in these pre-constructed decks because, you know, even if we are technically in the allotted window, I wouldn't expect to see it because that's not in the spirit of what Wonders has talked about. I think what'll be really interesting is if they are two orbital decks, like decks that, for instance, if you're doing a banishing blink style deck and you have a bunch of boundless and tall wind cards, there's only going to be one mythic in that deck. One, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Showcase mythic. Like, this is the mythic that front lines the deck. And so, you know, I don't know what the mechanic would be for having a card that's multi-orbital. I think it would be really early to be branching into that, but I could be wrong. I think it'll just be really interesting to see how, if they do multi-orbital decks, how they balance that out so that the love is kind of equally spread between the orbitals. I don't know what the answer is. It's definitely interesting and intriguing. Either way, I'm very excited to see what's going to be in these decks. I think the big thing is going to be, you know, the more that we see what's going on in these decks, the more we might get some spoilers, all these fun things. I think we just need to stay tuned and figure out whether they're going to be kind of leaning into unique abilities, unique keywords from Call of the Stones, or whether they're going to be kind of supporting meta things that we're already seeing. I think the only other thing that I can really think of is if there are things that the team wants to be kind of meta, abilities that they want to kind of push to the forefront, or play styles that they kind of want to push to the forefront. We could see that with certain starter decks, with the Mythic decks. If they really wanted to push a certain play style, they could make a deck of that play style, and then people getting into the game would be learning with that play style, and it would become more popular. One of the things that I've noticed with Magic the Gathering is that there's kind of this ebb and flow, and frequently, once a pre-con is released, we see more of that kind of play for a little while, and then it goes back down. And then, you know, we just see things go up and down as there are cards that really complement certain play styles. When Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, I think that's it, came out, it was very popular to play vehicle decks and other ninjutsu style decks. The two things that came as precons with that deck. There was also like modified creature. There was a modified deck. Ninjutsu wasn't a wasn't a precon, but it was really common in the set. So all those things went up in popularity. And then let's keep talking about vehicles. That went back down as we didn't have a set that really had a lot of vehicle support. And then Aether Drift came out earlier this year, and now we've seen the amount of vehicle play go back up because there's more support for vehicles. I think, you know, what we see coming out and where there is support for different types of cards and for different types of play style will really affect the meta. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see, you know, if we start to see, if we get any spoilers for these three precon decks, if that affects the value of any other cards. I think it's just something for us to keep an eye out and watch for. I'm really excited to see whatever these are going to be. If you have any ideas of what they're going to be that I haven't talked about, or if you think I'm on the money, or if you think I'm throwing in this direction and everything is in that direction, just let me know. I'm really interested to see what everyone thinks. Like always, please like, comment, subscribe, and keep being your wonderful selves.